Hi, my name's Steffi and I play video games and then interview the game developers of those video games. On this episode, I speak with Danyil from Hive Studio, creators of Windshire. The Hive Studio team are still working on the best storyline for Windshire, but what I can share with you is Windshire is a systemic open world action adventure RPG. There are orcs, there's a platypus, and there are three friends. We discuss what makes a great RPG, why Breath of the Wild has been a huge inspiration for Windshire, why it's important for video games to have purpose. We discuss what has motivated Danyil and the team to try and finish the game after multiple attempts. We discuss the importance of community and not giving up on your dreams no matter how things become, and much, much more. Links to all of Hive Studio's social media are in the bio below. And don't forget to beam me up, crew. Support this channel by hitting the thumbs up and by hitting the subscribe button. So, you have stated you want to make the best action adventure RGP game. I'm curious to understand, what do you love about action adventure RGP games, and will we see those qualities in Windshire? And also, what do you dislike about them, and will you avoid those qualities in Windshire?
So some of my favorite things in specific action RPGs is the combat and how you as a player interact with the AI. A big focus for me with going into Windshire was I wanted to have really fun AI, which is something that's a lot easier said than done. But the combat aspect, seeing how Breath of the Wild implemented that system of your sword breaking as you hit an enemy, you scouring to find another weapon to attack, albeit frustrating in the beginning, it creates another dynamic to that combat system that just kept me entertained throughout the game. And some stuff I just don't like is the grindy aspects, the aspects of you running around for ages just to go from quest to quest, you skipping dialogue, just the boring, everything but the combat, really. To put it lightly, it's just I feel like there's a lot of room to improve on those aspects, and that's something I want to try to capture, although maybe not perfectly in Windshire.
You speak a bit about the questing side of the quest features of your game. We'll get into that in a moment. But now that you've mentioned AI, you've mentioned that it has been one of the most difficult things for you to get right. Forgive my ignorance, but why is it so difficult?
So AI is really complicated because if you don't do it right, you can tell when you don't do it right, but when you do it well, no one's going to notice.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So I remember hearing some GDC talks about AI, and then Halo, there was, whenever the AI, they were messing around with it, how much damage, how much health these enemies do or take. Mm-hmm. When the values weren't right, I might be misspeaking about this. I haven't seen it in a minute, but from what I remember is when you don't get the values right, everybody knows how frustrating it is to get one hit from some enemy you don't see, or when an enemy takes too much damage to take out, you notice those things very fast, and it almost turns you off from the game. But when you do everything right and the player feels like they're in control, they almost overlook the basic AI and the core functionality of the system. Mm-hmm. So something I've struggled with Windshire is even just making AIs wander in a believable way around the map without making them look robotic is very difficult to do and requires a lot of math. And since they can't think for themselves, everything you want them to do has to be told specifically how to do it, if that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, which I feel like is probably an enormous task in itself.
Yeah. When I was creating the first few iterations of our combat system, you would notice that AIs would move forward and then back to attack the player. It was almost sequenced, and you could notice that heavily. And it just created the sense of you're fighting an AI rather than you're fighting something living in this world, which was something important to me.
Interesting. So would you still say it's still one of the hardest things you're having to do, or has something more difficult popped up?
I would say without a doubt, it's the hardest thing I still struggle with to this day. Even a few days ago, I spent close to like 2 days trying to get the AI to wander using a physics based controller, which adding physics on top of AI was not fun. Um, but then once getting that to work, having the AI be able to be like moved around by different physics objects and stuff like that
Hmm.
was like interesting to see play out. So if the player runs into them, you notice that they like kind of like bob away from them or running around. And if you like hit them, they're now able to like kind of like get knocked back in
Yeah.
almost a realistic manner. Um, but getting it to that point took hours on hours and a lot of sweat, blood, and tears.
I can imagine. Keep up the good work because it'll all be worth it. I completely appreciate that. I was about to say little things like that make such a big difference in the game, but big things like that make such a big difference in the
Yeah,
game. So
yeah.
totally get that. You've stated that you want to create the best RGP game. So what does that mean? What does the best RGP game mean to you?
That's an open-ended question. So the best RPG in a perfect world would be one
Mm-hmm.
that has the highs of the combat and has those action-based scenes, but also when you're just moving around and getting from point A to point B would be really interesting. You have different ways of moving around, different ways of, even playing with friends, having different things to do other than just doing quests and killing enemies. There should be kind of like a balance of everything at the same time. And that's kind of what we struggle with Windshire, and why, kind of jumping the gun a little bit, why we've restarted the project a couple of times was because we couldn't nail what made the best RPG, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a
So
crazy question. It's ludicrous. I
yeah,
totally
yeah,
understand.
it's very
And it's so personal as well, I think, like
yeah.
very relative to the player and what that player wants.
And I think Breath of the Wild almost gets there. Like you
Yeah.
have the climbing, you have different ways of moving around the map, you
Nice.
have the combat that's intriguing. The quests aren't like shoved down your throat almost,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense, because a lot of games are like move to point A to point B, talk
Yeah.
to this person, move back to point A, kill this thing, gather 5 things, move back. Um, so having kind of a questing system that's like overlaid on top of the gameplay where the world leads you to where you want to go, sort
Mm-hmm.
of like Breath of the Wild, once again, a huge inspiration for me. The
Yeah.
towers and like there's point of interest that kind of lead you and progress you through the game without someone specifically saying like go here or go there.
Yeah. You want a bit of a sense of freedom as well in it, which is the concept of freedom within a game and having fun and creating your own world and creating friends and with the balance of quests. So completely appreciate that. You continuously mention that Breath of the Wild is a big inspiration for you, and you've also stated that you've drawn a lot of inspiration of the concept of everything flowing together. So, wanting a systematic world. I guess what draws you to this, and why do you want to incorporate this into your game?
Yeah, one of the biggest things is if you're playing Breath of the Wild, every system has a purpose and they all work together in a way that creates sort of like an immersive experience. And that's what brings me to the systemic world design is immersion. I don't want a player to sit there and feel like they're playing a game, but I want them to like experience what this world would bring, and almost brings you into that world because it's like the immersion aspect of it. You while it's raining, the player becomes slippery, the attacks become duller, it's harder to see, but there's also benefits like fire arrows don't work, you can't light bombs off, and everything just sort of makes sense. Like you don't expect it to be raining and still fire to deal damage to the player. And it's cool to see even NPCs and stuff react to the weather and how climbing up a mountain is harder when it's raining, which all just kind of makes sense. And that's what drew me into doing something similar with Windshire on a smaller scale, of course. But um, like a fire arrow that hits a barrel makes the barrel explode, or something like hitting a string with a cage attached to it with an arrow would make the cage fall down and trap an enemy in it. Those sort of like small features we've implemented throughout the years were something we all enjoyed messing around with. And I remember playing with some other the devs on the team back when, before we even added multiplayer, just trying to see who can catch an orc into the cage, because it was all about timing and accuracy and stuff like that. It was just like something even I just sat there and experimenting what I could do and how I could make it better and more.
How much progress have you made on the orcs? And are the orcs able to imitate inhabiting the world like humans? So we spoke about this previously, but have you made any progress on that? Because I know it's a very big part of what you want to implement in the game. How are you going with that?
Yeah, struggling. I can say that for sure. One of the first things we've recently started implementing as we're like redesigning the orcs and how they all like move around is incorporating a herd system, and that's just like the beginning of what we want to do.
What's
and by
a
that,
herd system?
So instead of orcs walking and wandering the world by themselves, like all of them having their own places they need to go, we're actually grouping them up based on characteristics that the orcs have. So whenever an orc is spawned, we give them like a loyalty from 0 to 1, a rating for loyalty. We're giving them a rating for like how confident they are. And based on those, they're going to actually group up with other orcs and wander and attack the player if they see him, kind of as a group rather than alone. So we're getting that interaction working, and it's super exciting to see them like create unique groups based off random chance almost.
They're going to have their own little personalities and consciousness.
Yeah.
They're going to take over the world.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Okay, I can't wait. And I'm so curious, do you prefer working on the orc characters or the human characters more?
They're even. So as of right now, with the humans and the players, we're focusing a lot on what they can do in the world, as in how combos, and kind of getting into the nitty gritty of like combo timings and things like that. But with the orcs, it's almost like free reign. We can do a lot more kind of entertaining stuff with them. Like the herd system kind of came up in the conversation with our animator. We thought it was cool. And it was like completely changed how the AI behaved in a way that we really liked. So right now I'm liking the orcs a lot more than changing 0.01 to 0.03 in the time between combos.
Perfect. I completely appreciate that. And can I ask, how deep of a backstory do your characters have?
It goes pretty extensive, but we're not sure how much we want to expose, as we haven't really like written everything.
It might
out.
Change moving
yeah,
forward.
It might change. But what I will say is like
Yes.
we have the storyboard. We have the story for why the humans are coming onto this island. We have the story for why the orcs care about these crystals so much, and the kind of like the interaction between that and taking a lot from like historic events and spinning it with our own creative liberties to create a story that not only entertaining but also is rooted in realism.
Oh, I can't wait. So there is going to be, I feel like there's a lot more to come that you haven't, like, It's crazy. You're sharing the entire process, which is awesome, but I feel as though there's so much more that you have to share, and that's going to unfold moving forward. So that's so exciting. I can't wait. You have stated one of the most important things to a game dev is, how do we keep our game impactful and interesting to play? What have you and your team added into Windshire to honor this statement?
Keeping a game like impactful is something we've been trying to kind of nail down correctly. It's a lot more difficult than, making the combat feel good or doing this or that. For our team, we've been trying to make Windshire impactful by like the experiences it brings to the player, in a sense that by bringing in multiplayer, by bringing in this new class system we're working on, and by changing the game loop in general,
Hmm.
we've shifted the focus from kind of an open-ended, pointless sandbox game into something that like has meaning, has a direction. You know exactly what you're doing at any point. So for example, like our class systems are kind of the first step into making an impactful experience and making it more fun for the user, because each friend that you play with can have be a different class, from a warrior to kind of like a swordsman to an archer to a healer, and all of them work together and all have like pros and cons whenever they're kind of grouped together in like either duos, trios, or in a full team of four. There's like each class has a unique aspect to it, so you know your purpose, you know what you can add and what you can do.
You speak a lot about the importance of a game needing purpose and ensuring that Windshire um, has purpose. And so you've spoken a little bit about you're wanting to do that through quests, specifically quest zoning. So can you share a little bit more on that?
So as we've worked with the project, quests and quest zoning kind of shifted
Okay.
almost, and we've kind of kept it under
Why am I
wraps
not
with
surprised?
yeah, yeah. So quest zoning and quests have been kind of like shifted into turning the entire game loop into one big quest,
Okay.
if that makes sense. So if you've ever heard of games like Hunt Showdown, Escape from Tarkov, these are more extraction based games, and taking the core fundamental of what an extraction game is. Another example would be like Enter the Gungeon and those sort of like roguelikes, kind of combining them all into an experience and making the game itself a quest, rather than having an NPC give you different quests to like progress you through a normalized generic story that I myself would not be able to write, because that's a weak spot for me. But we wanted the game itself to be a quest. If I know that's very broad, but
I have no doubt that the end project will be very interesting, and the fact that you're so passionate about it, it's you guys will you'll end up producing something super fun, super interactive, and super engaging. You have stated you've downscaled the game to finish the game quicker. So I'm curious to understand what are we missing out on? What are you removing from the game?
one, like I've stated previously, was the like Ubisoft AAA movement system. I thought it was cool. I thought it was gonna work, but first off, it just didn't fit the aesthetic I was going for. It was very heavy on development times and just a lot of other negatives that outweighed the pros. So that's why I
Mm-hmm.
decided to eventually cut it out. Also, the normalized kind of questing system is something that we're like trying to go away from, which I know some people really liked, but I never personally liked in games. So we're trying to like steer a different way into having a questing system and stuff like
You'll
that.
come up with something better or just equally as cool. So your
Hopefully,
community has nothing to worry about.
yeah. But those were probably the two biggest ones that we had to cut.
I know you have been fully documenting your entire journey, and I know that this may be a difficult thing to answer because you have pretty much been so open about your process, what you're adding into the game, what you're changing. But is there anything you can share with us today that you haven't shared already?
Um, I would have to say, kind of, I hinted at it, the floating
Before? Yeah.
islands. Yeah, that was something that we're kind of keeping under wraps until we can figure out the technical side of it. But we had me and my animator and my modeler. We all have this like vision of your the game is set up on like almost clouds, and each floating island has a specific kind of purpose in the game, and there's it's a vision that's like hard to explain, but it's there, and we're super excited to share it when it comes to life soon.
You probably don't know yet, but will each island have like its own theme?
Maybe, I think, what we want to do is each island will at least have its own camp, like orc
Nice.
camp, and have a unique kind of aesthetic for this, and that's going to tie back into the game loop and the movement options and the class system, and we're super excited to just finally show it, but it's a little too early.
I can't wait. I can't wait. Ah! You have been working on this project for some time. You've publicly shared that you've started again. I'm curious to understand whether you regret starting again. If you do regret it, why? If not, why?
It almost has like two sides to a coin, right? A part of me really likes the fact that I restarted, and another part of me, and my friends specifically, don't like the fact that we restarted. Yeah, so in the total time span that I've worked on Windshire, we've probably restarted 3 or 4 times in total, which is, as you grow as a game developer, you notice how certain systems could have been implemented a lot easier. And especially early on, it was very difficult to work with older code because I was still learning. Yeah. So with that, it created the sense of like going back. I was like rewriting a lot of systems over and over and over again.
So wasting a lot of time?
Yeah, a lot of time on just redoing the same things. And I got into the cycle of like, oh, I learned a better way to implement this, so I'm going to spend time and rework older systems so that way in the future I can go back and it'll be easier. But that caused a lot of development lag, as in it spent like weeks just redoing the project. But that's a lot of cons. Some of the pros are just the fact that now going back and implementing, let's say, a new effect to whenever the orcs get hit. So it takes 15 minutes and it's very customizable.
Nice.
To the point that we can have like one orc do this thing, but another orc react completely differently when we hit them. And it's not even, no programming is needed. So everything became a lot more modular, which is a big reason I'm happy we restarted. And also each time we restarted, we kind of learned what Windshire was truly supposed to be. And we were kind of like digging the foundation. And now that, we restarted for the 4th time back last summer, we truly know what Windshire is supposed to be and where it stands.
Oh my God, so many questions. I have so many questions. Wait, before we get to like what Windshire is meant to be, because I think that's so interesting in itself, I'm curious to understand, when it comes to your game dev skills, what do you feel as though you have improved on? What did you used to find really difficult, and what do you find easier now, essentially, since you've started the game 4 times?
Yeah, I feel whenever I first started, movement was actually the biggest struggle.
Movement.
Really hated it. Just getting a character to move around was like the bane of my existence. Any movement from the player to the enemies, just hated it. It was a lot of math I personally didn't understand. But as we kind of continued restarting and we went from like a super simple movement system where it's just W, A, S, and D to move your character to something like Ubisoft's movement system where animations flow together, we kind of ended almost at like a Goldilocks where it's not super complex, where it's taking us 2 to 3 weeks to implement a new set of movement system or movement animations, but it's not basic enough where it's not fun. So we implemented a whole physics-based movement system, which not only feels great, but is fun to play and also gives you that like almost refined look to something that was originally not too complex.
What advice would you give to a game developer that finds themselves in a similar position to you, thinking about starting over again?
Right. What my mentor has told me through the years, as he's watched me fail and pick myself back up again, is just a simple phrase that I would live by and now live by, is just simply get it done. And it's super simple, but every time you're stuck on a problem, you're wondering, should I just restart everything? There's a better way of doing this. You need to consider the fact that you need to get it done and you can improve on your next project. And that's something I wish past me would have almost understood, because if you look through the history of Windshire, we got to a point where it was almost a game and then we would have restarted. So if we just pushed ourselves to like that last 15%, then we could have simply released, had projects under our belt that, albeit not the best, would have been able to showcase to other people that, look, we did finish a project and we're working on something way better. So if you think you can get it done or you can make it better, simply get it done first and make your next project 10 times better.
I really appreciate that. And I honestly wasn't expecting you to say that because I have the same sentiment that you have in life. I think it's in general a great quote to live by in every aspect of your life. But I also have a bit of a giggle because I've been reviewing all your social media content and you shared that your first game, you got a lot of, I don't want to say the word bullying, but you got a lot of you got made fun of for the characters you made. But I'm looking at the characters and I think they're really cute. Like you started off with the mercenary and the mercenary trying to kill the goblins. I'm like, why were people making fun of it? I thought they were so cute.
Yeah, I remember when we first started, it was just simply two spheres on top of each other. And we called that revolutionary.
Yes, it's cool.
It was simply because I couldn't model a player to save my life. I tried for hours before I settled on two spheres, but something about that style just really clicked with me back then.
Yeah.
And I kind of rolled with it. And it was simple enough where I could create multiple enemies because I would just change the color of two spheres and call it an enemy. It almost had its own style, but long term in envisioning what I wanted for my project, it was just not cutting it. And that's when we restarted first with the first ever player model.
Will you ever go back to your original version? I know you've stated that you've kept it all. I want to see the little mercenary. You have to bring him to life.
I honestly might. I've always wanted either to add Easter eggs where if you complete the project you could have, or complete the game, you could go back and play as these different player models throughout the ages and start with two spheres on top of each other. Then the first ever human I ever modeled and thought I was going to be the next Blender guru. And then just going on from there with the third iteration of the player model, and now this is our fourth.
Yeah, perfect. Bit of fun. It's all fun and games, and you've learned from it throughout the whole process, which is awesome. How much power are you giving to your community? And I'm specifically thinking of the example of the burrito weapon.
So, since this whole game has been, sort of developed with a community in mind, back all the way in 2018 when we started, which is running over to 6 years now, which is scary to think about. But we've always had the community centered first, as in through the community there's been multiple running jokes about what we should add into the game. For years it was a platypus, and that started off by a simple poll of I wanted to add an animal, but I wasn't sure which animal I wanted, and someone jokingly said platypus. So if you go through old comments on our channel and our Discord, we have tons of people going where's the platypus on every single thing we shared. And then I remember it was sometime in 2022 when I finally sat down and I implemented this platypus, and the community engagement was astronomical. Everyone was loving it, and seeing that the connection of adding something the community's been wanting into your project, and even if it's as little as a platypus or a burrito, it kind of brings the community together for a moment. So if there's any good ideas we see on our comments, which is something I have a story about, but if we see a good comment or good ideas on our channel, Discord, Instagram, we almost discuss all of them in our meetings, and we decide whether or not this would further the game in a positive light. For example, recently on our last devlog, we had someone leave a very detailed comment about floating islands and looking into making the map itself a floating island, which for me I never thought of. But as we kind of talked through it in our Discord and our meeting that day, we noticed that maybe floating islands would be a good way to kind of remove a lot of that fluff between camps or between objectives. So we kind of take every suggestion we get from the community very, very seriously, even if it's a burrito or something one off like that.
That's so cool. Floating islands, I feel like would be awesome. So is that something that you're going to potentially implement?
It's too early to say.
Oh,
and it
that
might
sounds
be in
so
cool. But what we noticed is that it came up before this comment was recommended, this issue of what do we do in between objectives, or what do we do in between this. And then we read this comment and we started thinking of, it's like, this kind of kills two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
It's a unique aesthetic, but also it removes a lot of the fluff and gives us really interesting, almost movement capabilities between these floating islands that could, make the player feel more engaged and immersed in a story like this.
I love that. I can't wait to see it. I think I'm documenting your whole entire process. I think it's cool. And I also really appreciate the fact that you've documented as much as the bad stuff and as much of the negative stuff as the good stuff as well, which I think is really refreshing and rare. Not only that, I feel like, again, game dev is extremely challenging. It's tedious. It's repetitive. You know better than anyone. And the fact that you're sharing that, I think, is awesome. Not only that, you're marketing at the same time, you're building a community. And when the game is finished, I feel as though it's not just you guys putting out the game, it's also the community is a part of that too. So please keep documenting that whole process because it's so magical.
We will. It's definitely a struggle to, put up these devlogs, and that's why slowly but surely they become more spacious as each, you got the development time, then you got the time to actually make the devlog, get the clips, stuff like that. But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, and then you can look back on it. It's almost, it's really magical. But I completely appreciate in between also working, studying, hang out with friends, family. It's a lot. So you're doing a good job. You've documented your entire game development journey. And along with documenting it, you've shared a lot of milestones and everything that you've added to the game, everything you're changing to the game almost in real time. So I am curious to understand what has been the most exciting thing you've added to the game in your opinion, and what has been the most exciting thing you've added to the game that your community has loved. They could be the same thing or they could be different.
Me personally, it has to be the inventory system, because it's something more unique. If you look at other indie games that have implemented something similar, and we wanted to take that idea and kind of make it fit our game. So being able to remove UI and clutter and stuff like that take you out of the immersion, we wanted to create a system that makes the player actually do something and interacts with the world within the game itself. And that's why I love it the most. I don't see many games with this, and there's a different sort of battles you got to fight with an inventory system
you
like
want the
this.
Battles. You just want to battle everyone.
I do. But that's what makes game development fun, because now we can't just, fill up the game with a bunch of meaningless items like 600 worm dirt or something like that. We actually have to have every item be useful and make the player decide which one he wants to carry and which ones he doesn't.
I appreciate that. So I guess, has the community loved this as much as you've loved this, or have you found that the community has loved a completely random aspect of the game?
I will say that I think the community really liked an older feature we implemented that we're starting to bring back. There's two of them. One, we got a lot of support with the Ubisoft movement system that we had in the previous version. Unfortunately, scope and development time was really, really bad with that sort of system, as in every animation needed to be manipulated, edited, and made sure they fit in every scenario. So we had to scrap that. But I will say the immersion and having the explodable barrels and stuff like that, as we start bringing those features back in, those were one of the biggest that the community actually enjoyed to mess around with.
I love that.
And also, of course, the platypus. But
so you're keeping the platypus?
Yeah, we got to bring him back, but we got to keep him in just as a memorial to those old Discord members.
I love that. That's very cool of you guys. You keep mentioning game juice. What is game juice?
Game juice, the best way I could explain it is kind of like the huff, or like the little bit that you need to make a game go from just hitting something with a stick to actually feeling the hit. It's almost like, you can play a song on a piano, but until you hear the sounds, you're not going to understand what you're playing.
Okay,
So
cool.
for us, it was, you can always hit an orc, but how do you really know that you hit an orc? Because if there's no animation, there's no effects, there's no sounds, then it almost just looks like a sword going through an enemy, which is really what it is. But we need to like capture that like instant that sword actually makes contact with that enemy and make the player feel the impact of that hit. That's what game juice is, in my opinion.
Nice. I just love how you just keep like mentioning it. I love it. I think it's such a cool word. I'm going to start
Yeah.
using it. You have openly spoken about some of the self-doubt and lack of motivation you have felt in your previous attempts of creating this game. I want to understand what has motivated you to start again and what motivates you now to keep going.
I think the biggest one has to just be community, and not all of it is just on Discord and YouTube, but having friends and family that like uphold you to what you like doing. So a big portion, which is kind of like a joke in my group of friends, is when is Windshire going to get released? Or if we're talking about a game that hasn't been released yet, everyone's, poking fun at the fact that it's been years and where's Windshire? And, those lighthearted jokes kind of are like gentle reminders of like, we really need to get this project, just keep taking one step at a day to get this done, because there are people who are interested in playing it, and there are people that want to see you succeed. And that was like the biggest motivator for me.
That's so nice. And I guess I'm curious to understand, what do your friends and family think of it? I think they sound like they are supportive, but
Yeah, they're supportive in like the way that friends are, as in like they'll poke fun, they'll make fun of it.
yeah.
But at the end of the day, they all do it in a way to like check up on the game, see how it is, see if you're still working on it. And it's been like the biggest reason I've continued to push through the days of burnout and stuff like that, was just to one day sit down and have all my friends join me and play
Yeah.
Windshire.
I can't wait. You'll get to that very soon, sooner than you think. Um, Knowing how much work you've put into it, would you have started knowing how difficult it was?
Um, that's a good question. Personally, I don't like thinking about how difficult something can be before you jump into it, just because I feel like a lot of people are gonna sit back and go, "I'm not ready for a challenge like this," or "I don't have the right equipment, I don't have a team, I don't have this or that," and I kind of jumped into Windshire first, just wanting to create some sort of project. And then as time progressed, I got more skills. I was able to make features more complex, more fun. And, you take it one day at a time. And something I live by is, as long as you do 1% better than you did yesterday, you're eventually going to be where you want to be.
Absolutely. And I guess, did you ever anticipate it taking this long?
No, not a day of my life when I thought that, me sitting there freshman year of high school, coming up with the name Goblins and working from there was going to turn into, sitting and talking about a game called Windshire that I'm extremely passionate about.
Crazy. And how much pressure do you feel to actually finish the game?
A lot. So from not only my own team, but friends and family and the community in general, everybody wants to see it done. I want to see it done. And it kind of like continues to push this like overwhelming kind of, not overwhelming, but like good amount of pressure to like get this done. But then I also understand that good things take time, and I'm not going to rush any portion that I'm not happy with.
Absolutely. Well, I'm also going to add to that pressure respectfully. I want to play this game. I want to see the game. But take your time and I can't wait to see the finished project. Can you please finish this sentence? Behind every great game developer is...
The community.
Oh, that's so sweet! I love that! You just died a little bit inside.
Yeah, no, I will say that it's like something I stand by, and I feel like I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for the early people in my life that brought me and pushed me to where I am today. From my older brother to the first ever Patreon supporter that I'm still friends with, to, you know, the first, you know, viewer and subscriber that I saw, and yeah, all of them.
How cool is it, people supporting you like randoms? Crazy, hey?
Yeah, it was weird. Like, I never thought I would ever get like recognized from game dev outside of like game dev communities, but I was sitting there in college one day and somebody came up. It's like, hey, I saw you. It's like, you're the one that does YouTube, right? I'm like, I was taken aback because I was like studying for finals or something, and we talked for a little bit, and it was just weird to get like recognized for that, and for them to say like, I can't wait to like play the project you're working on. It was surreal. So
oh, I love that. That literally like melted my heart. I was not expecting you to say that. That's really cool.
If you are a game developer, keep pushing. It gets worse before it gets better. And there's going to be that moment where everything kind of clicks and you play your own game and you're like, wow. And the one experience I had before we end off is the first time that I had like 6 or 4 to 5 people from different parts of the world connect to me after implementing multiplayer, and seeing my own characters run around and fight each other, and seeing every system I work together, and knowing there's people from the UK to Canada all connected to me playing. That was the moment that I was like, game dev might be the best possible job.
Oh, that's so special. I love that. Oh, it's so nice. I really appreciate this. I think you have such a great attitude. I respect the fact that you're still going. And again, just to put a bit of pressure on you, get the game done. Share it with the world.